I wanted to put this question to you that was sent via email by Alan Coleman. It's not necessarily Six Nations related, certainly Ireland related, and looking at the year ahead. And I've found it really interesting. Alan says he's a long-time listener, first-time mailer. So firstly, thank you, Alan. And he says there's a lot of talk of World Cup cycles at present. Do you think Lions tours damage Ireland players from injury and form perspectives for the 2 seasons after they happen? I'm going to throw this to yourself, by the way. So Alan says, our Lions heroes from 2021, Tadhg Furlong and Jack Conan, are struggling with injury and form since then. Leinster had a number of Lions in their squad that suffered a drop in form at the end of last season. In the previous tour to New Zealand in 2017, Sean O'Brien was the hero, but he rarely reached those heights for Leinster or Ireland thereafter. And if you look at the best Ireland players to have been omitted by the Lions in 2021, Gary Ringrose, James Ryan, Johnny Sexton, and Andrew Porter, who was injured for that tour, are either hitting the heights of their typical form or playing at a higher standard than we have ever seen from them. So Alan wonders, do you think the Lions tour, instead of a break and a pre-season, might be damaging our players' form and injury profile for the World Cup 2 years later? We've been criticised as a team for peaking 1 year out from World Cups. Could the Lions tour mean that a selection of our best players actually peak 2 years too
early? I think definitely there's a feeling in the game that the Lions tour is incredibly difficult and draining on players mentally and physically. I wasn't sure this one would be because it was a shorter tour than normal, because like players tend to go away in June anyway on an international tour, but usually it's more condensed. And obviously the Irish tour was a longer tour. It was 4 games it was 5 games this year. But in general, sometimes those tours were becoming 2 or 3 tests, and that was it. Whereas obviously the Lions tour traditionally is a much longer and more game packed, or packed in more games. So yeah, it does. But look, the players would never. It's a risky take. Some players are able to bounce out of it and keep that form up. And there's not a player who that I've come across who wouldn't choose to go on a Lions tour and take that risk of maybe not at their absolute peak the season after. But it does seem to drain players in England, who traditionally had always provided the most amount of players for those Lions tours. There's certainly a big feeling there amongst their international coaches that they need to be very wary of the load that they put on their players the year after because of the effects of a Lions tour. So I think your listener's spot on.
If you actually look at the whole Lions squad, go through people who are listening, and you kind of like, none of these guys are actually playing well, or many of them are currently injured and have had injury issues all season. So the thesis extends well beyond the Irish. There is Tadhg Byrne, who's just a freak, and I think he can play every game every week for the rest of his entire life and still be playing really well. He's just a phenomenon. But really, the majority of that squad are out of form or injured. And I've definitely held that belief for a while. I do think the players still see it as a massive peak in terms of like the competition. Obviously, the last tour was awful. We all know that. No one's pretending anymore. But in general, the Lions tours are amazing for them in terms of memories in rugby. It's very lucrative for them as well, which is an important factor to remember in a short career. But it does seem to greatly impact on you. And you can understand why. It's really physically draining. Obviously, you're at 100% all the time because you really have to fight for a place in the team. You have to hide injuries, I would guess, or mask the severity at times because you want to play those tests and you want to be training all the time. And obviously the level of the games is excellent as well. Even just being in a new environment, different coaches, different characters, personalities, you're putting that side of yourself across. There's not the comfort of going into camp and having your click or whatever. You've got to put yourself out there. So it's a massive undertaking mentally and physically. And it is no surprise really that it has that toll on players.
Well, to extend both Alan and your points as well, Murray, in the last 30 years, let's call it the professional era, there have been 8 World Cups, and only one of them has been won by one of the 5 countries that conceivably could be involved in the previous Lions tour. That was England in 2003. So the Lions go to New Zealand in 1993, South Africa win the next World Cup in 1995. Lions in South Africa in 97, Australia win the World Cup in 99. Lions tour Australia 2001, England win that World Cup. That's the exception. New Zealand, Lions tour in 2005, South Africa win the next World Cup in 2007, South Africa in 2009, and then New Zealand win the Rugby World Cup. Australia in 2013, New Zealand defend their title. New Zealand then host the Lions in 2017, and South Africa win the next World Cup. So bad news for Springbok supporters. Bernard has just messaged the Zoom call saying, I'm like Gary Doyle here, reading out all these stats and figures.
Go back further. Go back further. No, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. You haven't convinced me.
I have to say, it doesn't quite hold up so well when you go back further. But yeah, but I guess it's, yeah, I don't know. It just struck me when I was thinking of, because I guess when I read Alan's email, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. But also there are 4 other countries involved here. So what, you know, I didn't want us to sort of play the victim necessarily. But then you look at those 4 other countries that could be involved in an alliance for at a given time, and they all tend to suffer as well. So, hey, he might be onto something.